Dr. Imani Clark wiped a smear of dark green culture medium from her brow as the first rays of dawn filtered through the single dusty window of her mother's garage. Outside, the cicadas had already begun their morning chorus. But inside this cramped makeshift laboratory, silence reigned, broken only by the gentle hum of a salvaged centrifuge and the rhythmic click of pipette tips. Imani's heart pounded so fiercely, she thought it might drown out the sound of the equipment. For the past 3 years, she'd converted every inch of this 12 by 20-foot space into a hub of clandestine experimentation. Rusted metal shelving held stacks of sterile flasks borrowed from underfunded university labs. An old aquarium heater maintained her retrofitted incubator at precisely 37 degrees Celsius, and a string of LED grow lights, hacked from hydroponic kits, bathed her bioreactor in a soft blue glow. Tonight, she had finally pushed the system beyond its limits. At the center of the chaos sat her prized creation, a custom-built bioreactor, its clear walls stained with streaks of cell debris, humming gently as it circulated a batch of human cancer cells through her engineered oncolytic virus. She tapped the touchscreen controller and watched the readout spike. The viral titer had doubled in the last hour, just as she'd predicted. With trembling hands, she transferred a drop of supernatant onto a slide and peered through her grandmother's old microscope. In the eyepiece, she saw what she had only dared to imagine: healthy epithelial cells standing tall and intact, while clusters of malignant cells literally ruptured at the seams, membranes bursting, chromatin spilling out like microscopic fireworks. The virus had done its work with surgical precision, sparing normal cells entirely. She leaned back, breath coming in short gasps. A triumphant smile spread across her face as tears pricked at the corners of her eyes. Finally, she whispered. Minutes earlier, Imani had run a parallel control, mock-treated cells in a separate flask, expecting only minimal spontaneous death. The stark contrast between the two populations confirmed that her viral construct was both potent and exquisitely targeted. She dashed to her laptop, fingers flying as she saved every image, every data point. She recorded a quick voice memo. Observation 1.3. 92% lysis of HeLa, clusters within 36 hours. Zero off-target effects on fibroblast line. Proceed to replicate under CD55 receptor blockade to confirm specificity. Her voice trembled with a mix of triumph and exhaustion. Outside, the sun had fully risen, painting the garage walls a pale gold. She glanced at her phone, 2:17 a.m., and realized she'd been at this for nearly 16 hours straight. Yet fatigue vanished as adrenaline surged. This moment could change everything. Imani pulled on her faded lab coat, threads worn thin at the elbows, and retrieved a flash drive from her pocket. She copied the raw data folder, thousands of high-resolution time-lapse images, spreadsheet logs, and sequencer readouts, onto the drive, securing it in an encrypted directory. If anything happened to her, these files would bear witness to her discovery. She sealed the drive in a tamper-evident bag, stamped with her personal signature. Her next step was clear but fraught. She had to validate these results in a proper institutional setting. But after years of grant rejections, her proposals dismissed as too risky or insufficiently backed, she knew she couldn't trust any academic or corporate lab with her data. The very institutions that embraced billion-dollar therapeutics for diseases of privilege had consistently turned away projects aimed at treating cancers prevalent in underserved communities. Tonight's victory felt as much a personal vindication as a scientific one. Before logging off for a brief rest, Imani arranged her lab notes into a coherent draft manuscript. She titled it Selective Oncolysis of Carcinoma Cells via Engineered Tumor-Specific Virome, and wrote an abstract that emphasized both efficacy and safety. She plotted the outline of a cover letter to Nature Medicine, fully aware that any submission would be met with skepticism or outright rejection. Yet she pressed Save with a determined click. As she switched off the centrifuge and flicked the lights into low power mode, Imani paused at the threshold of the garage. The dawn chorus outside seemed to swell, as if the world itself were congratulating her. Cradling the encrypted flash drive against her chest, She closed her eyes and inhaled deeply. Tomorrow, she would face the uphill battle of publication and patent filings. But for now, in this quiet moment of hard-won triumph, she allowed herself to savor the revelation. She had discovered a genuine cancer cure, and nothing, no bureaucratic hurdle, no corporate predator, would stop her from bringing it to the world. 2 mornings later, Dr. Clark's elation had barely settled when her inbox erupted in a cascade of notifications that made her blood run cold. First, an automated email from the U.S. Patent Office. Application number 17/654321 filed. Inventors Imani Clark et al., claiming priority as of April 12, 2022. But the filing date was 2 days before her breakthrough, and the list of co-inventors included no trace of her name, only 3 unfamiliar white scientists. Her fingers shook as she clicked another message. A cease and desist from Trinity Biopatents, threatening immediate legal action if she did not halt all research, publication, and disclosure of the viral platform within 48 hours. Attached was a slick summary report branded with Trinity's logo, alleging insufficient safety validation and uncontrolled oncolytic spread, based on data points that made no sense to her. Graphs showing 100% lysis of healthy fibroblasts overnight, and virus titers purportedly off the charts when, in her hands, the virus had been exquisitely specific. Panic clawed at her chest as she logged into the secure cloud folder where she had stored every raw image and spreadsheet. The login screen spun endlessly before returning an error. Access denied, user not authorized. Her data, her life's work, had vanished. Leaping up, she darted to her filing cabinet and pulled open a locked drawer. With trembling hands, she retrieved a second flash drive she'd stashed months earlier under a pile of funding proposals. But when she inserted it into her laptop, the LED flickered red, corrupted. Somehow, someone had overwritten both her cloud archive and her offline backup. Tears blurred her vision as she replayed the past few days in disbelief. She recalled the late-night grant panel that had dismissed her for lack of institutional backing, the whispered jabs about her garage band science, and the way white colleagues subtly questioned whether her work could ever meet industry standards. Now, their disdain wasn't just rhetorical. It was legal, systematic, and devastatingly effective. Summoning every ounce of composure, Imani slammed shut her laptop and dialed her university's tech transfer office. Her voice cracked with rage as she demanded validation logs, server access records, anything that might trace the breach. But the curt reply from the IT director, "Cybersecurity is investigating, Dr. Clark," offered little comfort. Alone in the cold hum of her garage lab, surrounded by empty flasks and silent equipment, Imani felt the full weight of the conspiracy arrayed against her. A corporate machine of white-owned patent trolls and billion-dollar legal teams had seized her miracle, burying it under a mountain of fraudulent claims. Yet as she looked at the empty bioreactor, she steeled herself. This theft would not be the end of her story, but the spark that ignited her fiercest fight. Less than a week after discovering her data stolen, Imani sat in the dim glow of her laptop screen as the pieces of a darker puzzle slid into place. An anonymous tip arrived via an encrypted burner email. 2 senior executives at Pharmax Biotherapeutics, Dr. Richard Ellsworth, head of oncology, and Karen Whitaker, VP of Strategic Development, had funneled over $2 million through shell companies to fund Helix Holdings, the front used to usurp her patent. Those funds paid for forged signatures, falsified lab notes, and a relentless smear campaign designed to bury her work before it could see the light of peer review. The magnitude of their betrayal struck her like a physical blow. Pharmax was one of the largest pharmaceutical conglomerates in the world, its ivory tower boardrooms a world away from her suburban garage. Yet here they were, colluding in shadow to protect their multi-billion-dollar market share in cancer treatments. Treatments that cost hundreds of thousands per patient, priced far beyond the reach of low-income communities. Her low-cost, highly effective therapy threatened to undermine their business model, and they had moved swiftly to destroy her credibility. Imani dug deeper, unearthing industry newsletter blurbs that anonymously criticized her work as premature and unregulated, then tracked the domain registration records of the sites. They all pointed back to Pharmax's digital forensic team. She discovered doctored safety reports circulated under the auspices of Trinity Biopatents, claiming her virus exhibited off-target toxicity in murine models, despite the fact she had never tested it in animals. Those reports had been quietly cited by regulators to press her institution to withdraw support, freezing her access to critical equipment and supplies. As the conspiracy's outlines crystallized, Imani felt both outrage and grim resolve. Her research assistants had disappeared, some reassigned under budget cuts, others discouraged by whispered warnings of career suicide. A major reagent supplier had been pressured to refuse her orders, forcing her to work with expired culture media. Even her department chair, once a mentor, had withdrawn his backing after a threatening call from an anonymous donor. It was clear. Pharmax's reach extended into every level of academia and industry, and they would stop at nothing to see her silenced. That evening, Imani convened a clandestine meeting in the garage with her two most trusted allies, Dr. Luis Hernandez, a white bioinformatician who'd once hosted her at his lab when her funding ran dry, and Priya Singh, a white former patent attorney turned open-source advocate. Under the flickering LED lights, they pored over financial records, forged documents, and email headers. Together, they mapped out a strategy: secure alternate lab space outside Pharmax's influence, rebuild her viral construct from independent backups, and unmask the conspiracy in the court of public opinion. As rain pattered against the garage window, Imani closed her notebook with determination. Pharmax had unleashed their legal and financial juggernaut, but she had something far more powerful: irrefutable data, unwavering allies, and the moral clarity of a scientist fighting to heal rather than to profit. The corporate conspiracy intended to bury her breakthrough, but in that moment, she vowed it would ignite her greatest fight for justice. By the time Imani stepped into the cavernous marble foyer of the federal courthouse, exhaustion weighed on her like a physical burden. She'd spent the previous night drafting voluminous legal filings by the dim glow of her laptop, counterclaims alleging misappropriation of trade secrets, identity fraud, and racketeering under the RICO Act. Her fingers ached from typing, her eyes stung from reading clause after clause, but she refused to let Pharmax's shell company operatives steamroll her breakthrough. Her pro bono team, led by civil rights attorney Marcus Whitfield and patent law specialist Priya Singh, greeted her with determined smiles. Marcus, a tall, soft-spoken man with a mane of salt and pepper hair, placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We've framed the RICO claims to expose the entire conspiracy," he said quietly. "Now, we need to survive the discovery phase." Priya, equally resolute, slid a sheaf of subpoenas across the polished oak table. "We're issuing third-party subpoenas to Pharmax's auditors and the shell firms behind Helix Holdings. We'll probe every shady transaction." Their optimism dimmed, however, when the first discovery demands arrived. Trinity's high-powered legal team, led by the formidable litigator Charles Witherspoon, served Imani with over 5,000 pages of document requests. Every email she'd sent in the last 3 years, unredacted financial records, personal phone logs, even her grandmother's mortgage statements, ostensibly to prove undisclosed conflicts of interest. Worse still, the court set a $500,000 bond for her countersuit to proceed, a crushing sum that would bankrupt her modest savings and leave her mother's house, where her garage lab stood, under threat of lien. Imani stared at the bond order in stunned silence. The judge, a steely-eyed jurist known for enforcing procedural rigor, had signed it without comment. "The law requires security for potential willful infringement," read the brief order. Imani's hands trembled as she handed the papers to Priya. $500,000? She whispered. "Where do we even begin?" Their next hearing was a study in intimidation. In a judge's chamber, Witherspoon loafed in a high-back leather chair, his legal briefs piled like brick walls around him. He leaned over, lips curling in a polite smile. "Doctor Clark, Surely you see the necessity of securing potential damages before proceeding? His tone was condescending, an unspoken reminder of the gulf between Trinity's corporate coffers and her meager defense fund. Marcus rose calmly. Your Honor, my client's research benefits patients globally. Strangling her with a bond this size punishes innovation, not protects it. He produced affidavits from independent scientists attesting to her data's authenticity and safety record, including a letter from a renowned virologist who'd witnessed her peer-reviewed results in a confidential workshop. Priya presented redacted financial statements, showing her family's inability to post the bond. Yet, as the hearing closed, the judge reserved decision and scheduled the next status conference 8 weeks out, effectively freezing her countersuit and forcing her to defend without relief. Back in her garage lab, the lights flickered and died one muggy afternoon as the power company responded to Trinity's collection writ. Imani sat in near darkness, heart pounding, her beloved bioreactor silent. She pressed her hand against the machine's cool metal, a physical connection to the cure she had risked everything to create. On her kitchen table, creditors' letters piled up, overdue invoices for culture media, reminders from the university that her lab access would be revoked, and a looming notice that her mother's home equity line would be tapped to satisfy Trinity's legal fees. Yet, in that harrowing void, Imani's resolve hardened. She refused to cede the field to Pharmax's legal onslaught. She and Priya began rallying patient advocacy groups and civil rights organizations, planning a public campaign to expose how corporate power and racial bias combine to suppress life-saving innovation. Meanwhile, late-night strategy sessions charted a path through the quagmire. Tilt the courtroom with whistleblower evidence, leverage public pressure for a bond reduction, and rebuild her viral construct in parallel clandestine facilities. As the judge's next status conference loomed, Imani closed her eyes and took a steadying breath. The legal quagmire threatened to drown her breakthrough in red tape and intimidation, but she was determined to fight on. Every bond demand, every subpoena, and every court order only fueled her conviction. No corporate conspiracy, however well-funded, could extinguish the cure she discovered, or her drive to bring it to the world. For 2 sleepless nights, Dr. Clark wrestled with the legal deadlock and the emptiness of her garage lab. Equipment sat idle, creditors circled, and every attempt to reclaim her data was met with stonewalling from Trinity's high-powered counsel. Despair threatened to overwhelm her, but in the darkest hour, a beacon of hope arrived in her encrypted inbox. The message was anonymous, but unmistakable. Meet me at the Fab Lab after hours. Come alone. Bring nothing but your passion. Attached was a map to a converted industrial workshop on the city's fringe, a place where tinkerers, hackers, and renegade scientists gathered under the radar of corporate scrutiny. That evening, Imani slipped into the Fab Lab's back entrance through a chain-link fence, her heart thrumming like the humming of the emergency generator, offsetting the sensory deprivation of the locked-down garage. Inside, a dozen makeshift benches glowed under mismatched lamps. At one, Dr. Luis Hernandez, a white bioinformatician she'd befriended during a grant review panel, beamed at her. Behind him, Priya Singh, the white patent attorney, beckoned, her laptop open to lines of de-obfuscation code. Welcome to the resistance, Priya whispered. We've secured a dark web node that Trinity's subpoenas can't reach. We can rebuild your viral genome and your data archive here, outside their jurisdiction. Luis pointed to a high-resolution monitor displaying fragments of Imani's original sequencing reads, pieced together from a dozen USB drives she'd distributed to trusted friends months earlier. We reverse-engineered the primers and aligned the reads to a decoy scaffold, he explained. In 2 days, we'll have a complete digital reconstruction. Imani's chest tightened with hope as she watched lines of code parse through gigabytes of sequencing files. Every base pair restored was a victory, proof that her cure could not be erased by corporate malice. Yet physical validation remained elusive. She needed lab space unconnected to Pharmax's network. That crisis was anticipated. Priya pulled up a floor plan of the Fab Lab's back room, a biohood repurposed from a shuttered veterinary clinic, an old spectrophotometer, and a supply of basic reagents donated by a sympathetic reagent distributor who'd smelled foul play and cut her off from Trinity's influence. Over the next 3 nights, Imani and Luis worked shoulder to shoulder in the sterilized hood, resurrecting her oncolytic virus from the reconstructed digital blueprint. Priya stood guard, her phone pressed to her ear as she monitored legal filings, ensuring Trinity's subpoenas would hit nothing but a locked door. First, they synthesized the viral genome fragments via rapid cyclers, then transfected them into producer cell lines cultured in tea flasks. Each morning, they checked under the inverted microscope, budding viral particles clinging to cell membranes. It was painstaking work, meticulous pipetting, careful buffer exchanges, and constant vigilance to prevent contamination. On the fourth night, Imani performed her first functional assay in clandestine mode. She exposed a small batch of human cancer cells to the regenerated virus and watched through a borrowed time-lapse camera as the cells began to swell and lyse at precisely the same 92% efficiency she'd recorded in her garage. Across the bench, Luis let out a low whistle. "We did it," he said, voice thick with reverence. Priya allowed herself a rare smile. "And legally, you own every byte of this reconstructed data," she affirmed. "We've anchored it in 2 offshore repositories, too. Trinity's subpoenas can't touch it." As dawn's first light filtered through the Fab Lab's grimy windows, Imani felt the full weight of their achievement. The cure she discovered, nearly buried by corporate theft, now stood resurrected in defiance of every patent troll and smear campaign. Gathered around the glowing bioreactor, the 3 of them vowed to carry this underground alliance forward, to compile a public interest dossier, to prepare whistleblower testimonies, and to launch a media offensive that would expose Pharmax's conspiracy to the world. They packed up their clandestine lab, leaving no trace behind, but carrying in their hearts the unquenchable fire of justice. In that hidden workshop, beyond the reach of Trinity's legal juggernaut, Imani Clark reclaimed her life's work, and in doing so, lit the fuse for a revolution that would finally bring her cure into the light. The packed courtroom hummed with anticipation as Dr. Imani Clark strode to the witness stand, her posture poised yet resolute. Sunlight slanted through tall windows onto rows of polished mahogany benches, where white-collared Trinity Biopatents attorneys sat flanked by corporate executives. Across the aisle, her legal team, Marcus Whitfield and Priya Singh, exchanged a determined glance. Today's hearing would decide whether her underground evidence could shatter Pharmax's patent conspiracy. Judge Ellsworth, a stern jurist known for impartiality, peered over his bench. "Dr. Clark, you may proceed with your testimony." The hush deepened as Imani took a deep breath and laid out the timeline. Her garage lab breakthrough, the fraudulent Helix Holdings patent filings, and Pharmax's covert funding channel. She described, step by step, how Trinity's shell companies had doctored safety reports, how their proxies had weaponized regulatory bodies to freeze her work. When Imani finished, Priya rose to cross-examine Trinity's lead executive, Karen Whitaker. Under Priya's relentless questioning, Whitaker's polished facade cracked. Confronted with email chains between Pharmax officers and Helix Holdings operatives, Whitaker first stammered, then invoked privilege, until Judge Ellsworth overruled her objections, citing the whistleblower affidavit's authenticity. The courtroom gasped as the hidden financial ledgers appeared. Millions funneled through numbered accounts, earmarked for Project Oblivion. Next, Marcus called a noted virologist, Dr. Elena Russo, to validate Imani's clandestine replication. In a crisp, unwavering voice, Russo confirmed that the reconstructed virus perfectly matched the sequences in Trinity's own provisional patent, proof that Imani's original data had been stolen rather than independently developed. Rossi's demonstration of the virus's specificity, no off-target lysis in control assays, further undermined Trinity's falsified safety claims. As the afternoon sun dipped low, Marcus delivered the closing argument. He spoke not in legalese, but plainly. "Doctor, Clark's work is a gift to humanity, not a commodity to be hoarded by corporate greed. These pages of false patents and doctored reports represent an affront to every patient denied this cure. His voice rang through the hushed chamber, and Imani felt a swell of vindication. When Judge Ellsworth returned to the bench, the air crackled with tension. He granted Imani's motion. Trinity's provisional patents were invalidated for fraud, Helix Holdings' filings voided, and Pharmax's key executives were ordered to produce all relevant documents within 48 hours. Furthermore, the court dismissed Trinity's injunction, immediately restoring Imani's research rights. The courtroom erupted in subdued relief. Imani's shoulders loosened as Priya and Marcus embraced her, tears of triumph mingling with exhaustion. Outside, press cameras flashed as she emerged into the late-day sun, her encrypted data once again reclaimable, her breakthrough unshackled. In that pivotal courtroom victory, Dr. Imani Clark not only dismantled a corporate conspiracy, but cleared the path for her cure's return to the light. Proof that truth and tenacity could outmatch even the deepest pockets and darkest collusion. Within weeks of the court's decision, Dr. Clark's phone rang with requests from hospitals across the country. Her first stop was Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta, where a compassionate use trial had already enrolled 20 late-stage cancer patients. On a humid September morning, Imani donned a crisp lab coat and stepped into the oncology ward, greeted by Dr. Amara Johnson, the ward's white chief oncologist and longtime advocate for underrepresented patients. Together, they administered the first official dose of Imani's oncolytic virus under FDA-supervised protocols. Imani watched the infusion line drip steady into the patient's IV port, her heart pounding. Over the next 48 hours, she and Dr. Johnson monitored vital signs and tumor markers. When the first CT scan showed a 30% reduction in lesion size and no off-target effects, elation rippled through the team. Nurses high-fived, and Imani nearly cried as she recorded the data in her tablet, annotating confirmed specificity with trembling fingers. Buoyed by these results, Imani founded the Clark Institute for Equitable Biotech in partnership with Morehouse School of Medicine and the Public Interest Law Group that had supported her case. In a renovated wing of the old university hospital, she assembled a diverse leadership team. Dr. Elena Russo as Director of Clinical Research, bioinformatician Luis Hernandez as Chief Data Officer, and civil rights attorney Priya Singh as Head of Community Outreach. Their mission: to deliver affordable cancer therapy to underserved populations worldwide. By November, the Institute deployed mobile treatment units, retrofit vans equipped with mini-labs and cold chain storage, to rural clinics in Alabama and Mississippi. Imani traveled with the teams, training local nurses to administer the therapy and collect follow-up samples. She watched as patients who'd exhausted every option saw palpable tumor shrinkage. At a roadside clinic in rural Alabama, she met Mrs. Carter, a black grandmother whose throat tumor receded enough to allow her first full meal in months. Mrs. Carter clasped Imani's hands and whispered, "You saved my life." In January, the World Health Organization invited Imani to Geneva to present her data at their annual summit. Beneath the vaulted glass ceiling of the World Health Organization headquarters, delegates from over 100 countries crowded into the amphitheater. Imani spoke plainly. Science is a global public good. Our virus cures without price tags. Applause thundered as she unveiled partnerships to roll out the therapy in sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America, regions where conventional treatments were scarce. By spring, mobile units had reached Nairobi, New Delhi, and São Paulo. In Nairobi, Imani watched a young mother embrace her healed son in a sunlit courtyard. In New Delhi, slum clinics set up impromptu infusion stations beneath mango trees. In São Paulo, community health workers used solar-powered refrigerators to keep viral doses viable. Local press hailed her as a humanitarian hero. Back in Atlanta, at the Clark Institute's first anniversary gala, Imani stood beneath the same skylight that once illuminated her garage lab. Her team surrounded her, white, black, and brown colleagues who had stood by her through legal quagmires and corporate machinations. She raised a glass. To truth, to justice, and to every patient whose life reminds us why we fight. As the city lights shimmered through the hospital's restored windows, Imani felt a profound sense of completion, and yet a gentle stirring of new beginnings. The cure she'd discovered in a humble garage had transcended every barrier, proving that resilience, solidarity, and unwavering integrity could rewrite the future of medicine for everyone.